We'll probably do this again, but as we sit here at the end of February, what HBCU players do I think have the best chances of being drafted? Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Now, we'll wrap up today's episode with a look at phase 3 for Carson Vincent, a.k.a. the NFL Scouting Combine. He will not be up today, like I thought he might have for my everydayers who heard my indecision or uncertainty, I really should say. He actually will be the last guy on Sunday. So maybe we'll talk about Carson Vincent's performance on Monday or Tuesday's episode. But anywho, I want to kick this off with a benchmark. I think that we'll talk about this at another point. Maybe we'll talk about this at the beginning of April. But as we sit here right off of the HBCU Legacy Bowl, I think that this is an appropriate time to talk about what HBCU players may get drafted. I will always say this. We are not going to look at the HBCU representation in the NFL draft the appropriate way. Actually, you know what? I say that all the time, but I don't think that's true. I think that's a little bit dismissive. The value of hearing your name called, I can't even begin to quantify what that would feel like. I'll never know that feeling, but I can only imagine that getting the call as a UDFA, as important and as meaningful as that is, it doesn't hold the same weight as hearing your name called on television. I do think that that's different for some people. I do think that when you're talking about the amount of people who get drafted, that's a stat. I don't necessarily hear, oh, this school has X amount of UDFAs or this amount of people picked up in training camp. Like, that's not something that gets remembered. What gets remembered is how many people were drafted. That being said, that's the reason that we find this conversation valuable. That's the reason that we keep having this conversation. That's the reason that we keep hoping for more players to get drafted. I do believe we should still value the guys who are preferred undrafted free agents. Like, who was it? Mark Evans from UAPB was picked up by the Saints as a preferred UDFA. He got paid more than I think any other UDFA. Shaq Davis got picked up by the Saints. He got paid more than maybe one or two of their UDFAs. So that is still a valuable thing. And I want to make sure that we hone in on that. But I'm going to stop saying that we're looking at it through the wrong premise. That wasn't where I was supposed to go. So for you got to forgive that tangent. But I just realized when I was saying, I was like, no, I don't believe this, But the point is, fresh off of the HBCU Legacy Bowl is a perfect time. It's a perfect benchmark to discuss what HBCU players that we think are going to get drafted. I think there's one clear-cut answer, and that's Carson Vincent. Like, I'm not saying he's the only one, but he is the clear one. And we'll talk about him in segment 3 on how he's at a point where he just needs to not mess it up. But I do believe that Carson Vincent, with my chest, I can say, will be drafted when April rolls around. Let's kick it off with Vincent because, it's only right, in my opinion, to kick it off with Vincent. He went to the Senior Bowl. He's done everything that he needs to do up until this point. When you hear about being a small school prospect, and you never want to say it's a sure thing, but I'd say the stuff that he did in January at the Senior Bowl should allow all of us to approach this conversation with a certain measure of confidence. I want to read what Kyle Krabs, host on the Locked On Podcast Network, but then also a writer for 33rd Team. This is what he said about him. This is positives and negatives. I want to read these off real quick before I get to the other 3 players, because there's 4 players I think have a good chance of getting drafted. There's two I can say with my chest are going to be drafted and feel, kind of confident about it. But the positives for Vincent are possesses an attractive blend of elite length and athleticism to play on the edge, tackle challenges of the Senior Bowl's leap in competition well, showcasing good growth throughout the week with NFL coaching. And then lastly, natural gravitational pull will force rushers to take longer tracks to the quarterback. The negatives are can be guilty of stopping his feet at contact, losing his framing of the block, does not consistently frame explosive talent on the edge, can overset or hinge early and allow clean run throughs. And then lastly, can be prone to folding forward through the trunk when attempting to latch and secure. I know that's a lot of technical lingo and whatnot, but here's the thing that I wanted to add from some of the stuff I read on the write-up, because it wasn't just positive negatives. Power. That was a negative. Power of Carson Vincent, which is something that can be helped. It can be helped with a little bit of strength and conditioning. It can be helped with putting some weight on. And some of those negatives that he's guilty of, they're because of power, and some can be helped with power, right? Like stopping your feet is going to hurt you a lot because now you're utilizing power from a different base. And when you have more powerful rushes, you're not able to stop your feet, man. So these are things that you'll see. They specifically highlighted the Auburn game. One thing I thought that was interesting in that write-up is that Vincent will need stability and good coaching along the way, however, which may make him unequally attractive from team to team. That's good to know when talking about a mid-round guy. But I do believe that you're going to see Carson Vincent early day 3. That's my prediction as we sit here right now before the combine. He goes out and he kills the combine. I might even say he'll push it to day 2. I'll be honest with you. Now, the other guy is Elijah Williams. You don't dominate the Legacy Bowl for 4 days in a row in the way that Elijah Williams dominated and not pop up on radars. And here's the thing about Elijah Williams. If you pop up on a radar and you say, I'm going to go check out this Morgan State guy, you're going to see some phenomenal film. You really are. You're going to see a guy who can play in a multitude of different positions. You're going to see a guy who can do a lot for you on your defense, can align in a 3-4 defensive end. He could go. I think he has the ability to be one tech. I don't know if I want to put him at nose, but I wouldn't want to put him at nose because of the weight. Play 3 tech. He can do a lot of things for you along your along your defensive line. So you go look at what Elijah Williams put on tape. Yeah, you're going to like what you want. But here's the deal. Williams was out there at the HBCU Legacy Bowl, and he was dominating. You may make an argument that, it's against HBCU talent still, so that doesn't meet the strength of competition quota that is so often held against us. Okay, I'll give you that. But you don't dominate the way he dominated for 4 days in a row and just say, that's strength of competition. You don't do that. People are going to take note. Every single day, people are saying Elijah Williams, Elijah Williams, Elijah Williams, Elijah Williams. I don't care what division of football you're talking about. Dominant performances catch eyes, period. Like, that's not even a conversation. So if you want to say it was the HBCU Legacy Bowl, so I don't know if I'm going to be as optimistic as you are, I will allow you to reserve yourself. But let me say this. When you dominate at a subdivision, it don't matter what subdivision is. People are taking note. And now it's about what happens afterwards. If you go look at the film afterwards, I do think that is going to help him. That's the way that I look at it. I think that talent, check. He got that for sure. But I'm not just saying that he's talented enough to get drafted, because going into the Legacy Bowl, I did not think that Elijah Williams would be drafted. I didn't. I thought that he had the talent to be there in the late round. But I think the dominating performance at the Legacy Bowl pushed it from just having the talent to being on the radars to now checking the tape and all of the things that come with that. I think he can sneak into the 4th round. Into the late rounds. I'm not going to sit here and puff my chest out and say it like I did with Carson Vincent, but I think that Elijah Williams stands a really, really good chance at getting drafted because he popped out in the place that he needed to pop out. And he didn't just have a good week. He had a great week. He had a great week and was the talk of the city. People said it was the best HBCU Legacy Bowl performance they had ever seen during the course of the week. So, I think he was already on some radars, but I have optimism. More optimism than confidence. I'll say that. More optimism than confidence when it comes to Elijah Williams, but I do have a good amount of optimism. So that's got to be worth something, right? Now, as we push forward, we got 2 more guys that I think have a good chance of being drafted. They're both defensive backs, and I wanted to section these guys off between the trenches and then also in the secondary. So let's get to Robert McDaniel and James Burgess as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Roy. Before the Roy app, the NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. And I think at HBCUs, this holds truer than anywhere else. The Roy app, the NIL app, it allows you to choose the player you want to support, decide how much to contribute, receive exclusive content from the athletes that you back. And the best part is if the player transfers, right? We have that happen a lot. Say you was like, I want Andrew Jones to stay, so I'm going to send X amount of money to hopefully keep him at Grambling, but he still ends up going to the SEC. You still get it right back, right? Like that money comes back to you. The Roy app gives fans control. No more uncertainty. It provides you transparent, impactful support to help shape the team. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing your athletes today the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Today, as well as Locked On Saints. We had some big time news happen in New Orleans, so go check out my guy Ross as he breaks down the retaining, or what seems like the retaining, of Derek Carr. I want to continue looking at HBCU athletes who I think could hear their name called in the NFL draft. The one that I'm saying with a lot of confidence is Carson Vinson. I also put Elijah Williams in there because I do think that he stands a good chance of being drafted. Don't get this twisted, though. This is not an order of who I think is most likely to least likely. I think Robert McDaniel is the second most likely HBCU player to get drafted. And the only reason I didn't mention him second is because I wanted to categorize the big fellas versus the secondary. But I think Robert McDaniel is the second most likely HBCU player to get drafted, because as great of a week as Elijah Williams had at the onset of the week, starting with the HBCU Combine, I felt as if Robert McDaniel was getting a different level of hype than you typically see given to our HBCU athletes. It just call this a feel. And it sucks because he doesn't have the all swag. Like, he doesn't have the recognition that you would want to speak confidently about him getting drafted, which does give me a little bit of reservation, not because of questioning his quality of play, not questioning the standard that he upholds, but simply knowing that when you're a small school player, anything can be held against you. And maybe not being considered an all-conference guy, it will make people question if you really dominated your league. And that on a small school level, you kind of need to dominate. That's something that they are looking for you to accomplish. So that's something that I was looking at. I will be honest. That is something that I was looking at. But in general, when you see him, when you see the testing, when you see the size that he comes in and he's measured at, when you see the numbers that he puts up, I thought he had solid speed. I thought he had good explosiveness, like really good explosiveness. And in general, he has good strength. He's a great football player. He's a great football player. It's just about the testing, and I thought that he checked those boxes. He had about 15 or so interviews, if I'm not mistaken, at the onset of the week. The reason I say onset, and I stress this, is because when you talk about Elijah Williams and you take out talent, right? Like take out talent and just talk about stock and talk about how much people are, or how much buzz people are generating. When you look at Elijah Williams versus Robert McDaniel came into the week with a lot of buzz. Elijah Williams gained a lot of buzz as the week went on. And I think those are two different paths. And that has nothing to do with the talent of the player, right? I think that program has to do with it. No disrespect to Morgan State, but Jackson State has a lot going for them. They have a lot going for them. And I think that because you played on a prominent team, your abilities was showcased a little bit more. And I think that I'm not going to get into this whole Elijah Williams versus McDaniel thing. That's not where I want to take it. I want to simply talk about Robert McDaniel. To me, Robert McDaniel and Carson Vincent are two players who I feel I can say with a little bit of confidence that they'll be drafted. Like, I feel confident in saying that. Nothing's a sure thing. I don't want to sit here and get it twisted with you. Nothing is a sure thing. But if you had to ask me who's the most likely, I say Carson Vincent. If you say, is there anybody else who you think is going to get drafted? I would say Robert McDaniel. That is the order in which I would do it. And then maybe I would, that voice goes up an octave. I think that Robert McDaniel, I think that Elijah Williams and James Burgess, I'll just tell you the next guy, I think they're going to get drafted. But, different things. Elijah Williams, I feel if I had to rank it, it would go Carson Vincent, Robert McDaniel, Elijah Williams, James Burgess. That's the order I would go in confidence that they would get drafted. But McDaniel made a good breakup during the game. I thought that he showed good speed. I thought he did a lot of the testing right. I know the accolades aren't there, like I said, but he had a lot of people, even without those accolades, who were beating down his door. He had a lot of people who were calling, saying we want to get interviews, and that tells you what they already think of him. Now to go from there and to put together a good HBCU combine performance, to have a solid week. I didn't hear too much about him, but I did hear that he had a solid week and then have a pretty good game. They weren't throwing nothing on those guys. I think that that's going to do a lot for him, especially being from Jackson State. It doesn't always work that way. We've definitely seen that with a guy like Miller. Like Aubrey Miller, I thought he was going to get drafted. I thought the JSU, the prime love was going to do it for him, but it didn't do it for him, and that's okay. That's okay. But anyway, now I want to go, and also Jordan Reed called him the top-rated prospect here. So that tells you the kind of buzz that he did have. I want to mention that. James Burgess is an interesting one for me. Now, y'all know I'm high on James Burgess. The thing about Burgess that gets me is that we got to wait for the 40. And while it's not the end-all, be-all, it does matter a lot. It is how people are looked at. I think I was told Mikey Victor, I don't want to say what drill it was because I don't want to be wrong. I could say it if I remembered it. But Mikey Victor, the Alabama State cornerback last year, I think that there was a stigma that basically, like, he performed poorly on one of the drills. I think it was the 40. And that just knocked his stock. That was something that people just never really let go of Victor. Like, people still talked about, yeah, he just ain't have this. Maybe, I think it was long speed. So I'm just going to say long speed. And if I'm wrong, whatever. But know that I'm uncertain. But anyway, hey, Victor ain't had a long speed. Now, if Burgess comes out there and he doesn't run a good time, that's going to knock him. If he runs in the 4.6, he probably won't be drafted. That's the thing about Burgess, is that he's super talented. He's super talented. And if Burgess had the career that he had at Alabama State, if he had the stock and the talent and performance that he had at Alabama State, at just Auburn, if he had that at Auburn, he could survive a 4.6. But I just got to see his time. I wish he would have done something. I wish he would have done the vert. I wish he would have had the broad. I wish he'd had some sort of testing to walk out of the HBCU combine with. That's the thing that bothered me, is I've seen many people choose to not do the 40-yard dash, but I wish he would have done something, given us something to discuss. So I will say that the reason I have him fourth on my list, I don't even want to say last, but fourth on my list of guys, because I still think he stands a good chance. He goes out there and he runs a 4.51. I think he's going to get drafted. I do. He goes out there and he runs a 4.51. I think he could get drafted. But he runs a 4.62. UDFA. Probably a preferred UDFA because he's super talented, but UDFA, right? And that's the difficult thing, man. That's the difficult thing about this whole draft stuff. And Gerald and I have had conversations. That's my guy, man, for real. But Gerald and I have had conversations about how we feel about a player and what we think is going to happen. And those are two completely different things. And in this job that I sit here in this chair in front of this microphone and I discuss with you who I think is going to get drafted, this is not who I think deserves it. Like, I think Irv Mulligan is a guy who is really close, really on the cusp, but I don't know if he ends up getting drafted, especially with the depth of the running back draft class. Like, the NFL draft, the class of running backs coming out in the NFL draft is so deep that I don't know if Irv Mulligan ends up getting drafted. I think he'd be a UDFA guy. I think he could be impactful, but I don't know if it ends up getting a draft for him. Sam Bowler. Like, I think that there's guys who are talented that just aren't going to get drafted. And that's unfortunate, but that's what it is, you know? But anywho, like, I don't think Xavier Smith got drafted. And Xavier Smith is a dog. I love Xavier Smith. He's small, but but I loved Xavier Smith. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was he was a UDFA. So I'm just saying, like, you look at that, and now he ends up being somebody who really makes an impact for the Rams. But I get it. I get it. I get it. Herb Mulligan's on that list. Jada Byers, he's just small D2 guy. There's players who I think are going to get picked up. I'll have to do this with Gerald and start talking about draftees versus UDFA. But like I said, we're sitting here in the beginning of, or the end of February, just doing a benchmark. Closer to the draft, I'll update this. I'll hear more. I'll get some more feels, and I'll be able to say who I think is going to get drafted after that. But in the meantime, let's keep rolling. Not in the meantime, I'm about to wrap up today's show because it felt like a close. But we're going to push forward and talk about how this is phase 3 for Carson Vincent. We talked about him a little bit, and we're going to briefly touch on him again, as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Fabric by Gerber Life. Life moves so fast, especially when you have a family, right? So one day you're watching your kids take the first steps. Oh, then before you know it, they're taking the first steps on campus. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. As a parent, I'm sure that you want to make sure that your family is financially protected no matter what, and Fabric gives you that peace of mind. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. And speaking of segment 3, this is segment 3 for Carson Vincent this is phase 3 for Carson Vincent. Phase 1, right? This is the way I look at it. As we're progressing with Carson Vincent, he is right now the premier HBCU prospect. He is the guy we should have all eyes on. And I know typically people aren't having all eyes on offensive linemen. Well, it's time to break your tendencies today, because Carson Vincent is the guy who, if there's any HBCU player to be drafted, it's going to be him. He just has to have a green check mark in phase 3. Phase 1 was the season. That was the prove it phase, right? Like, you just need to make sure you live up to standards, because there's a lot of players who look real good until they're about to be draft eligible. And in that last year, you kind of taper off a little bit. At Alabama A&M, you don't have that luxury to taper off and people still say, yeah, I fooled with him. No way. So he came up. He was a Senior Bowl watch list player at the beginning of the season. He lived up to that promise, and he got to the Senior Bowl. That's phase 2. You get to the phase 2, and then it's just about reinforcing what people have already seen. It's about checking off the competition level checkbox. So reinforce that I am this guy, and I'm not a product of what I've been around. I can play on this level. And he did that. He had a great Senior Bowl. Remember what we looked at on his positives. One of the things he said, Kyle Crabb said, tackle challenges of the Senior Bowl's leap in competition well. That's great. Great that you performed well. Here goes the next part. Showcase good growth throughout the week with NFL coaching. If you're growing in a week of action, that tells me that you are coachable, number one, and it tells me that you're a quick learner. Those are 2 attributes that I think are always going to be favorable. Doesn't matter if you come from Alabama A&M. Doesn't matter if you come from Alabama. That is going to be favorable. You need to be coachable, and if you're a quick learner, we feel like we can give you a lot more on your plate than maybe somebody else. So that's phase 2. Now we're here at phase 3. And phase 3 is the NFL scouting combine. And here's the beautiful part. I don't need to know how long his arms are, his size, his height, because he did all of that at the Senior Bowl. So you've checked off real game action. You've checked off all-star game action. Now I just need you to check the testing. Don't mess up the 40. Don't have bad agility, right? Like, showcase quality athleticism to go with quality performance on the field. And Carson Vincent has secured a draft spot. Carson Vincent is now at the place where being drafted is his opportunity to lose. He no longer has to win over that opportunity. I think people look at him as a draftable player. I think he will be drafted unless he comes in and he just fails this test. I hate that I have to continuously use this guy, but Willie Drew last year, he was a D2 player. It's rare that you're going to get the D2 player up there at the Senior Bowl. You're not going to get many of them. They might be one a year, might be 2 years. You're not going to get a lot of them every year. It's not going to happen. When you get that, and I'm not talking about the HBCU part of it. I'm just saying Division II, let alone Division II HBCU. It gets even smaller from there. He went up to the Senior Bowl and he did not perform well. I don't think he had that good of a combine. But here's the thing. We didn't care too much about his combine because he already messed up at the Senior Bowl. So he wasn't even really stressing it. Carson Vincent won the combine. Or excuse me, he won the Senior Bowl. Carson Vincent won the Senior Bowl. Now I want to see if he can win the combine. I know his arms is long. I know he's got good weight. I know these things. I want to see what's that 3-cone like? What's that agility like? Right? I don't really care about your long speed, but what's your 10-yard? I just want to see these things. How athletic is Carson Vincent? These are questions that will be answered. And here's the thing. If Carson Vincent comes out and he shows himself to be a really good athlete in the shirts and shorts, that's going to boost his stock some more because he already has prototypical length. He already has good size. He already has a lot of things that you want to build on. He has the perfect build to be a developmental tackle. If you pair that with athleticism, somebody's going to say, we need to see if we can bring him to his peak abilities, right? Like, it's all about getting people to take a chance on you. And I think that Carson Vincent will be able to do that with a phenomenal combine. I already think he's ready to do it. I already think he can do it without the combine. But he goes and has a great combine. Get him out of here. Get him out of here. Remember what Kyle Crabb said. Vincent will need stability and good coaching along the way, which may make him unequally attractive from team to team. That will not change. But if you are a really good athlete at that position with the length that he has, yeah, I can guarantee there's gonna be way more people who say we want to take a chance with that guy, opposed to people who say no, we'll pass. I appreciate it. I know I hope that this Carson Vincent segment that I've been teasing since birth, I hope it lived up because I loved it. I enjoyed it. I had a great time. And this was fun. This is my favorite episode that I've done this week. I'll be honest with you. So we'll be back tomorrow. I don't know what we'll be talking about. Probably talk about some pocket watching. I got some figures on what these coaches getting paid. Let's see who's dishing out the most money. Maybe we'll do that. We'll see. We'll see. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.